The conclusion that there was a mastermind behind the Office Hall occupation incident was the conclusion of the assistant professor, Claire Elfin, that she told him. Hearing her conclusion, Professor Glass then praised her for having good intuition, but he then told her to be careful and not to miss what was important, namely the thesis on aura studies that he told her to look for. Claire then got scared when she saw the professor emitting a dangerous aura. She then frantically said that she would immediately prepare it tomorrow morning. Office Hall, Faculty Building. In Assistant Professor Claire's office, after she left Professor Glass's place and returned to her office, a student then came to see her and reported that she had collected materials related to the Office Hall occupation incident. Hearing that, Claire then thanked the student who turned out to be Annis, and she then read the report given by her. As she read the report, she also thought, seeing that the case was quite complete. Did she really have to think about the cause this hard? She felt so tired that she felt she could die, but no matter which way you look at it, something did seem suspicious. She then looked suspiciously at Ed's photo displayed on the report, while Ed himself was now visiting the Elt store. Seeing him there, Lortel then apologized for forgetting to prepare the contract. She was not focused. She then asked Ed to just visit again next week. As a form of apology, she had provided tea and snacks. The magic engineering supply had been prepared, so he could take it at the counter. Ed understood, but he then confusedly asked, isn't her work attire usually not like this? Hearing that, Lortel then said that today there would be an important meeting, so she dressed more neatly. She also asked him, what did he think of her current appearance? Hearing that, Ed instead asked about the important meeting. Lortel could only be embarrassed about it, but she then could only laugh resignedly at his insensitivity. Lortel then changed the topic and asked, was the construction of his cabin complete? Ed replied, it was in the final stage. Hearing that, Lortel then asked, did that mean he needed furniture now? Ed confirmed that, but the items in her shop were all too expensive for him to buy. Hearing that, Lortel said that she couldn't give them to him for free either. Giving away the items she sold for free was against merchant ethics. But, Lortel then broke the chair there and asked, isn't wood processing his specialty? Since this chair was broken and couldn't be sold, so she would throw it away tomorrow. Ed could only be surprised at her action. He understood what she meant, but he said that it was too expensive. But Ed then accepted it and thanked her. Lortel smiled happily at that. She also asked, how come his expression didn't change at all? She then walked over to him, and sat down at the table near him. She then recounted the incident. Honestly, it was kind of a gamble for her. She also knew that Ed never looked at her as a woman from the beginning, but Lortel said that Ahe looked at him as the opposite sex, just like he thought. She asked for this just because of her selfish desire. Hearing that, Ed also said that he understood what answer she expected, but Lortel said that she didn't think he would give her an answer in the first place, as he knew she didn't involve herself in a fight that she couldn't win. Now, he might look unconcerned, but one day, she was determined to make not only herself feel like this. She still smiled seductively even though her victory was assured, just like when she was cornered. That was the unique temperament of this merchant, to never reveal her true feelings. In the garden of the Sylvania Academy, Janica was seen, who looked very happy because she finally started her teaching session to Ed. Janica then summoned a lump of fire in her hand, and asked Ed to try to concentrate his magic power and feel it. Ed understood, then did as she said, and the object that looked like a lump of fire in his eyes, suddenly changed shape and spoke to him. It was Mug, the low-tier fire spirit. Mug then introduced itself and said that it was an honor for it to make a contract with him, based on the agenda of the regular report meeting last week, regarding the proposal for the selection of his contracted spirit. It had already completed the first stage, voluntary, passed the second stage, interview, cleared the third round of the Spirit Council's agenda and completed the fourth round of qualification verification. It scored the highest performance in magic efficiency with its own training in the North Forest, and he had the best empathy ability among the low-tier spirits of its level. It was already burning up, but it swore faithfully to burn its heart as well to serve him. Even Ed could only be dumbfounded to hear that. During playing the failed swordsman of Sylvania, he once obtained some kind of spirit-type skill, joking and laughing during battle, boosting each other's morale. It really felt like the content of friendship, but now it was completely different from the feeling he got at that time. He then asked why the qualification requirements were so strict. Hearing that, Janica replied that he was the one who asked for good spirit recommendations before. So she selected the spirits who had good magic efficiency according to their strength. In the process, there was a very slightly, teeny tiny complicated selection process. Hearing that, Ed then asked who made the selection process. The selection process was really very strict, because it made Tarkan, the intermediate spirit, as the examiner. Janica then asked Ed to take the mug for now. Ed understood, and when he had held it, he felt warm. Hearing that, Janica then explained, when he resonated with the contract spirit, he could feel its physical strength or magic without having to manifest it completely. If he resonated too hard, he would heat up, so it was important to control it normally. Hearing that, Ed then asked if he adjusted the level of resonance. Did its firepower change too? Janica confirmed that, but calling it firepower was a bit strange. It sounded like it was a machine. Ed was then amazed to hear that. Seeing Mug, who said please relay your orders, Ed really saw it as a portable heat. Ed then saw the status window of Mug. In short, it was a spirit capable of using some fire magic. He also saw his status window. Now he could use intermediate magic. Seeing that, Ed thought Mug was a very useful survival tool, and it didn't even finish. The wood, seeing his happy look after contracting the spirit, Janica was also happy. He looked very tired and exhausted, so seeing him smile was good. She also asked him to tell her if he needed anything. She would teach him about resonance and sensing itself before the first class today. It would be faster if they did it together, and to reach the level where he could contract intermediate spirit, they had to practice combat spirit as well. She would book a combat training room for them. And actually there were some accessories that could strengthen the resonance efficiency. But they were all in her room, next time they met. But before Janica finished her sentence, she suddenly remembered something and immediately stopped talking. She then called Ed, and said that actually she was a busy person. There were people lined up who asked her to teach them various things, so finding time for the two of them was very difficult. Janica suddenly said that to him, because she remembered the advice given to her by Tarkan and Clara, so she then acted a bit sleazy. She asked, isn't just asking someone for spirit magic lessons a bit too much? Hearing that, Ed also felt that she was right. Janica was then surprised to hear that. Ed then apologized to her. He accepted her kindness carelessly, as if he was entitled to it. He should at least offer her money. He couldn't give her enough money, but Janica was then surprised to hear that. She then asked what he was talking about. He was already struggling even to survive, so he couldn't just waste his money. He had to save it. She also wouldn't accept it, and just giving her money in exchange for what she did is too cold. Aren't they close? He made her angry because of that. Ed was stunned for a moment to hear that. He then asked, instead of her first asking for a compensation, why did it suddenly become like this? Hearing that, Janica was then confused about how to explain. She then said Clara talked about push and pull, but Janica then immediately realized her mistake. She then groggily immediately corrected her words. Clara said she was too generous, so she told her to learn to refuse. Hearing that, Ed said that she was not wrong. She really had a good friend. With a blush, Janica said that she was not like this to anyone. She then said she would tell him more next time. The next time they met at the combat training room, she would determine the time and tell him. She also said she would bring good accessories for him. If he needed a resonance exercise book, she asked him to just let her know, and Janica then said goodbye and left, because the morning class was about to start. Seeing that, Ed then raised his hand as a farewell. After arriving at his cabin, Ed then worked on the magic engineering supply he got from Lortel. He obtained the advanced crafting skill magic engineering. An advanced crafting skill slot has been consumed. The magic engineering supply he got from Lortel had a simpler structure than he thought, which made it quick to analyze it. He finally learned the proper advanced skill. He then lit the fireplace using ignition. He would use the mug when the fuel ran out, and vice versa. He would use the fireplace when its mana ran out. He could warm up the temperature steadily now. His living environment is now guaranteed to be stable. This fact made him very relieved. It felt like a burden from his heart had been lifted. Looking at the moon shining in the night sky, Ed finally realized that it was already this late. He then thought that he should check the traps first. When Ed was about to check the traps he set, someone's footsteps were heard in the forest where he lived. The person complained about the sky being so dark since she came after work. She then thought about coming tomorrow, but she then immediately rejected her thoughts. That person was the assistant professor, Claire Elfin. No matter how much she thought, there seemed to be a mastermind in both the Ophilus Hall occupation incident. She was suspicious of Ed. All those involved at the scene were students or staff of Ophilus Hall, and only Taylor and Ed had nothing to do with Ophilus Hall. If we exclude Taylor, who solved the incident himself, only Ed was left. She heard Ed often appeared in the North Forest, so she went there to check, but thinking about it, unless there was someone who ate and lived in that kind of forest, but then she was shocked when she saw someone who was dragging his quarry, while carrying Lucy, who looked unconscious on his shoulder. Claire's shock could not be explained in words. She also knew that the person being carried was Lucy, someone who was even the headmaster of Abel, who was great enough to be compared to the Archmage Grocht or the great sage Sylvania. Even he had to use all his strength against Lucy. And here she saw the scene when Lucy was carried away by Ed. She then became even more convinced that the mastermind behind the Ophilus Hall occupation incident was Ed Roth Taylor. Ed might be dumbfounded when he knew her thoughts. Claire thought her instincts were not wrong. She even thought maybe she really had a talent for detective work, and when she followed Ed to his cabin, she was then surprised by everything she saw. After Ed put his prey on the ground, he then put the sleeping Lucy in her tent. After he thought about it, he had an appointment tomorrow morning. There were so many things he needed to do, but he should sleep early today. Claire saw all his actions. She then slowly walked towards where Lucy was sleeping. She thought about saving her. And as she got closer and was about to reach her, a magical boom was suddenly triggered. Claire was then surprised to see that, and Lucy, who had been asleep, suddenly woke up and asked who she was. Seeing her alert attitude, Claire then introduced herself, but she was surprised when she saw Lucy, who came back into the tent. She seemed to be looking for something, with jerky in her mouth. Lucy then looked at her like she was looking at a thief. She then just left there with a bag containing her jerky. Claire could only be stunned to see it, but it reinforced her suspicions. The next day, Claire then returned to visit Professor Glast. She then asked if he knew the student named Ed who was expelled. Hearing that, Professor Glast just said that he didn't bother memorizing the names of untalented trash. Claire felt that his words were always scathing. She then said he definitely knew a student named Lucy. Lucy Merrill was conquered by Ed and made her unable to use her powers. They were investigating a suspicious situation in Ophilus Hall, but before that, somehow she went to the North Forest first. Hearing that, Professor Glast certainly didn't believe it. He just felt that Claire was making it up. Hearing his disbelief, Claire continued. In some way, she managed to use memory recording magic on the first floor of the Ophilus Hall. Hearing that, Professor Glast then asked if she had gotten permission. Claire replied that she hadn't. She was just making excuses. Professor Glast then advised her it would be better for her to write an explanation for it. Claire had expected it, so she had written it first, but it should still be given leeway. Claire then asked Professor Glast to see what was recorded by her memory recorder magic. Seeing Ed sitting posed like that, Claire felt he looked like a mastermind. Professor Glast was silent. Hearing that, he then asked, "Is that all?" Seeing his disbelieving look, Claire then tried to convince him again. She had mentioned it earlier. Ed was carrying an unconscious Lucy. Professor Glast asked if he was just moving Lucy, who was asleep. Hearing that, Claire was really made silent. She then could only walk out of the room with a look of depression. She also heard the voice of Professor Glast, who told her to make him a report. It made her even more depressed. When Professor Glast saw the memory recorder magic, he then remembered something. It was also seen in the report. Ed tried to stop Taylor's group, but they immediately broke through. Taylor, who was born in the path of a sword saint, Elvira, who was born with natural insight as an alchemist. With those two students, there was no way an ordinary human like Ed had a chance. But he was then surprised when he watched the recording further, seeing the scene when Ed cut the chandelier using the wind blade. Professor Glast was then seen pondering. While suspicion was directed at him, Ed himself was now testing the weapon he had just crafting. The weapon was in the form of a dagger. The effect of the dagger sticking into the ground caused a powerful explosion to the surrounding area. Ceremonial dagger. Explosive, a ceremonial dagger imbued with spirit formula, engraved with explosive magic that can be activated within a certain distance. The engraved magic makes the activation speed very fast and the magic efficiency is great. The dagger is infused with spirit formula by Mug, which has medium magic potential but small resonance range. He has been with this dagger for a long time, ever since he started surviving in the forest. He feels proud to be able to carve various magic on this dagger. Mug said the spirit formula has been incorporated quite smoothly. The more times a piece of equipment is touched by the wearer, the better the efficiency. Mug said that he was one step ahead. This was really a joyous event. This needed a celebration. It then said it would perform a song. Seeing it, who kept babbling and instead sang a song, Ed then pulled one of its wings to stop it. Mug then apologized. It admitted that it had made a mistake and wanted to make up for it. This was really embarrassing. The most embarrassing part was, it didn't know what its mistake was. It then begged Ed to tell it its mistake, and it would reflect and improve itself. But Mug was then surprised when Ed suddenly called it. Ed then told it to talk. The spirits who had left the mortal realm and took the path of low-tier spirits improved their phase by making a contract with the spirit sorcerer and receiving magic power. For a spirit sorcerer like Janica, it makes sense that low-tier spirits are willing to make a contract with her. But, Ed then asked, isn't this a bit strange from the beginning? What good is making a contract with him until they fight over him? Is it promised something? Hearing that, Mug then became confused and hesitated. Ed then suggested, they better clarify the existing situation. They also know each other, but Mug just kept silent. Hearing that, Ed was then confused to see that. With tears in its eyes, Mug then said, why did it hide something? The respect and loyalty that overflowed towards him was not purely out of admiration, but because of the ambition engraved on this lowly being. It really felt ashamed. If it made a contract with him and accepted the pure magic power around Janica, it could grow twice as fast as other low-tier spirits. Ed could only sigh hearing that. He then asked if there was anything else it wanted to reveal. Mug said, moreover, after digging into his reputation circulating in the academy, it found he had a strong authoritative temperament. To calm down, but before Mug could finish its words, Ed said that he already understood everything. He now understands the situation very clearly. Mug also breathed a sigh of relief hearing that. This is really heavy. It also complained, since when did the higher ranks in the spirit hierarchy become a privilege? How can they arbitrarily use their power just because they were born early? Hearing its complaints, Ed then tried to calm it down. He told it to take it easy. After all, they were just passing through, although Ed said so. But Mug couldn't be too casual. It was more comfortable like this. Ed didn't mind that, although his fighting skills were still lagging behind, but his physical abilities had improved significantly to the point of being able to rival adult men. She had filled his storage area with meat, vegetables, and spices. Now he was out of the misery of hunger and having no shelter. By putting in time and effort, he could remember simple memorization and theoretical arrangements. By reducing sleep time and repeatedly studying would force knowledge into the brain, of course with the exclusion of talent. From his point of view, it was difficult if he described today as a light day, but compared to when he first survived in the forest, this was a pretty good day. And when he was too busy struggling with his thoughts, he was then surprised when he heard someone suddenly calling him. It was Janica. She then told him to wake up and asked him what's wrong. Ed then apologized. He was not focused enough because he was lost in thought. Janica then asked him not to push himself. Working hard is good, but health is also important. Hearing that, Ed also thought he should focus. There were 3 letters he received today. The first was from the academy, and the second was from the Alt store. None of the contents were interesting, but the third letter had to be read carefully. It was proof that the plot had undergone significant changes. The current episode revolves around the main event of Act 2, the negotiation for the purchase of the Sage's Scroll. Originally, the Sage's Scroll purchase negotiation was a tug-of-war between the academy and the Alt store, but due to Elt's fall from power, Crefin Roth-Taylor, the person who originally assigned the Sage's Scroll purchase to Elt, joined the event. Eventually it turned into a 3-way battle between the academy, Elt store, and the Roth-Taylor family. Crefin Roth-Taylor intended to use the Sage's Scroll for his immortality research. When the situation became chaotic, he immediately threw himself into the negotiations. Crefin Roth-Taylor is a boss that only appears in Act 4 in the original scenario, and at this point, it is said that he is so strong that no one can defeat him, so he must be removed from this episode. If he gets the Sage's Scroll, he will leave quietly, but even without the Sage's Scroll he is strong enough to be the last boss of Act 4 in the original scenario. In addition, the information gain and whatever it was that was lost after he got it, could make this act impossible to complete. This letter not only detailed Crefin Roth-Taylor's actions and suspicions towards them, but also an invitation to him. The sender wrote, While Ed was pondering the contents of the letter, Phineas was now in the school garden listening to the report from Claire. Claire reported, he had gone to the North Forest, he had sent the letter as she had ordered. Hearing that, Phineas then praised him. Principal Abel said that Sylvania's financial situation is very concerning. She can't just support a private institution like Sylvania Academy. If this situation continues, the Elf store will get the Sage's Scroll. It's a shame that an item as important as the Sage's Scroll for the Academy will be sold for money. That's why he silently asked for her help. But Phineas felt something was wrong. She was confused. How could Crefin Roth-Taylor know how to participate in the negotiation of this purchase? Claire then guessed that it might be Ed who reported it, because he lived in the academy. He might have heard the rumors. If he became Ed, he would try any means to be recognized again and return to the family. Hearing his guess, Lortel, who heard it, then immediately refuted it. She then asked, could a low-ranking person like her share a cup of tea with the princess? Hearing that, Phineas did not expect it at all. She thought that Lortel hated her. Lortel said that it was impossible for her to hate her. Otherwise, why would she come to make this earnest request to her? She then explained, Crefin Roth-Taylor's involvement in the negotiation of this scroll was not caused by Ed, but because of her father's influence. Phineas was then shocked to hear that. Lortel continued, it seems that from the beginning he had asked her father to buy the scroll. Honestly, she herself did not know about it. Even though her father had lost his position, the plan to obtain the Sage's Scroll still continued. The time and effort spent by the Elf store was enormous. Hearing that, Phineas found it strange. After obtaining the Sage's Scroll, didn't the Elf store intend to sell it to the Roth-Taylor family? The interests of the two groups should be aligned. Then why did the Elf store and the Roth-Taylor family become competing to obtain the scroll? Hearing her confusion, Lortel explained. It was because she had no intention of selling the scroll to the Roth-Taylor family. Her current situation was quite unique, and it was best not to get involved with business connections connected to her father. Hearing that, Fiona then asked why she was telling her such internal matters. Seeing her suspicion, Lortel simply said, the enemy of her enemy is her friend. Princess Phineas would benefit from inspecting the Roth-Taylor family, and she would also be able to get the scroll. This would be equally beneficial to both of them. There was also a concern that Ed could get hurt because of this. Fiona was then surprised to hear that. She then asked if she was worried about him. Lortel said, because he had separated from his family and started a new life, it wouldn't be fair if he was misunderstood because of his association with the Roth-Taylor family. Fiona was really surprised. She didn't expect Lortel to be worried about someone. She then said, even so, he had definite uses, trying to seek help from one person to another, and pleading with the authorities to issue an order, but if he wouldn't talk either. Hearing that, Lortel then asked what if he wouldn't. Phineas replied, then she would have no choice but to exploit him. Lortel was stunned for a moment hearing that. She then couldn't help but laugh. Phineas was then confused seeing that. Lortel couldn't help but laugh because who would also dare to deceive and exploit him?